everybody. It is Saturday what date is it? Saturday the 21st of October. I completely went blank then. Welcome to my little podcast on crochet, knitting and the fibre arts generally. Hello Bunty, yes, you come to say hello. As I say, it's unusual for you to be the person hogging the camera. It's normally Toby, but oh look, here comes Toby to come and share the limelight. There's something about me pressing record on this machine, on my phone. The moment I do that, cats appear as if from nowhere. Anyway, it's lovely to have you both. Slightly off camera at the moment, but I think I can probably adjust downwards. And there you'll be able to see Toby as well. So, sorry, I'll try not to cover up the camera. Don't fight when you're... Oh, honestly, go on. Off. Cats. Who'd have them? Worse than toddlers. So, yes, welcome to my little corner of the internet. My name is Gerard, or Peter, or Boniface, depending where you are in the country. I am a crocheter and knitter, a sewer, a weaver, and eventually I will be a spinner as well, I hope. I live in Abingdon-on-Thames in Oxfordshire in the south of England, although I'm originally from Salford in Lancashire, now Greater Manchester in the northwest of England. And I am a former monk and a former bus driver, and I live with my two cats, Toby and Bunty, who like to fight every so often, particularly when they're on my knee, which is always a pleasant experience. I can see you, Toby, out of the corner of my eye. So welcome. So welcome if you are a returning subscriber and a returning viewer, and welcome if you are a new viewer. And if you are a new viewer and you enjoy spending time with me, then please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified when I upload future podcasts. I currently am working on a weekly schedule, but I've also got another parallel podcast going on at the same time, which is the Vlogtober podcast. I've completed 21 episodes in 21 days, and it's been quite an interesting experience. Unfortunately, it has eaten significantly into the time I have available for crafting. And for example, yesterday I went straight from work, more or less, out to film the podcast. I got back here about 6:30, 7:15, no, about 7 o'clock actually. It was 8:30 before I'd finished editing the podcast. I uploaded it, but it didn't upload. It hadn't fully converted before I went to bed, so I then uploaded it first thing this morning. So yesterday my crafting time was effectively zero, which I'm not actually worried about. I mean, it is difficult to some extent, given that this is a crafting podcast that I'm creating here. But I think the operative word there is creating. And the Vlogtober episodes that I have created, I'm very pleased with the skills I've learned, the techniques I've learned, and with the output that I've created. So in some ways, although it is more demanding because it's thinking of new ideas for the next episode and things to talk about or things to show, that has stimulated my creative side anyway. So it has been a creative experience. It's just not necessarily been the kind of creative experience that I would normally be taking part in. So I'm looking forward to the end of Vlogtober in some ways, although I will miss that daily sense of talking to you all. So it's an interesting, bittersweet prospect. But having said all that in that long preamble, I do actually have, I have two finished objects. I was thinking I only had one, but I have a significant finished object and then a minor finished object. So I will talk first about the significant finished object. And that is the Mermaid Tail Snuggle Sack is finally finished. For my great niece, Charlotte, who was 10 last week. That's right. This is going to be her Christmas present for her to get into and sit in her reading corner, reading her book. And I'm looking at the moment at buying a book for her to read to go with the snuggle sack, but it's now completed. This is completed using an E-wrap stitch, so it actually produces quite a stretchy fabric, as you can see, almost like ribbing, because there's a lot of extra yarn in each of the knit stitches. This was created on a knitting loom, and I enjoy making these. This one, obviously being a lot bigger, took a lot longer than the other two which I've made for the new babies. But I love the pink, actually. It's a kind of fondant pink, and I hope that, I'm sure she will, but I hope that Charlotte enjoys sitting and reading wearing her snuggle sack in the winter. So that's going to be a Christmas present for her, so I will wrap that up for her. And I've got to buy a book to go with it, as I say. And there are a number of mermaid books for pre-teens, older readers who are not quite not quite teen readers yet. So I will have a look around and check out. But if anybody has any suggestions of a suitable book for an intelligent 10-year-old to be able to read, then I'll be very happy to follow those recommendations. So please feel free to leave a comment below. On the comment side, I think I'm keeping on top of the comment sections in the videos. I do read all the comments, and I think in most cases I will respond. If I don't respond, it's because I've responded to the same thing, either to the same person or to somebody else already. But I do find I like the interaction, and it's nice because it builds it. Sitting here at home on my sofa is a very one-way method of communication. I tell you what I think and what I'm doing, but it's actually quite nice to get the other side of getting the thoughts back from other people, and the questions and the alternative experiences of the various things that I talk about. So I really do enjoy having the comments, and it really does make it a much richer experience for me. So please do make any comments that occur to you, and I will respond, usually within a couple of days, depending upon my availability and what else I'm up to at that moment in time. So, I will talk about my second finished object, but it's a very minor one. The Mermaid's Tale that I made was on a knitting loom, and I'm making a little tote bag for a friend's daughter whose birthday is in December. And I'm making it out of the rather nice sparkle chunky yarn that I got 10 balls of this for £10, and so it's actually knitting up into quite a nice, it's a tote bag with yarn overs and the like, so it's actually got a network of holes, eyelets going all the way through it. It will become more apparent when it's completed. So although I'm knitting it on a circular loom, it's actually a flat panel, so these two stitches are not joined together. So when it comes off the loom, it will just be a long flat panel, and there'll be two of these for either side, and then the strap, there'll be the base, and the two sides will be a single continuous piece, and then they'll all be stitched together. And she asked me if I would make her a bag, because I made her mother a bag for her birthday last year, and she's wanted one since. So I think a little tote bag that she can carry on her arm will suit her down to the ground. And it's this, I like this grey, but it's the lovely sparkle in it as well that I think will appeal to her. She is 12, or will be 12, I think, in December. Or is she 13? She's in high school. I think this is her first year in high school, so she'll be 12 in December. Is it? Oh, I think so. I'll have to double check now. She may be 13. Gosh, that old already. Anyway, sorry, I was miles away there. So I'm making this, and this is to a design by Luma Hat. I knew there was something wrong with that. Luma Hat YouTube channel, and I bought the pattern online. I'm very keen always to support designers. I mean, I love a free pattern as much as the next person, but I don't mind paying for patterns because it encourages the creativity of the people we depend upon to help us to express our creativity. So it's a very altruistic, not quite, but a reciprocal benefit arrangement. We pay for the designs, and then those designers are able to go and make other designs. And so we're able to do more and more. But one of the things that Denise on that channel did was to make, using Loomband little rubber bands, a lovely cover for the rather thin handled on the hook that you use to pull the yarn over the stitch. And so this is my other finished object, which is quite nice. And because it's the kind of rubber band that looms, it's the loom band kind of craze that people had a couple of years ago. But because they're rubber bands, it's actually a good grip. It doesn't slip, and it is easier to hold onto. And I find it's just the right size for me to hold comfortably, so that I can actually do this without. The plastic itself is only so thick, and this extra layer really does help to improve what I'm doing. So that's my other finished object, and that took, I suppose, about 20 minutes in total to make, and most of that was sorting out the colours, because I wanted, it's a black and white band with a red band separating it, so I wanted to have that kind of regular in between, and red, white and black are the colours of Manchester United, which is my football club, although I noticed at half-time today that we're losing 2-0, which is not good, but that's the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. So I've kind of moved on to my works in progress as well. So this is a new work in progress, and it's very difficult to actually see the design when the pattern is on the loom, but the stitches will stretch out, and you can see that there are eyelets, and they're made by knitting two together and then yarning over, pretty much as you would with knitting needles. And in order to give the stretch to allow that to happen, most of this is made using a U-wrap stitch. So a U-wrap stitch is rather like a normal knit stitch. So it's called a U-wrap because if you look at it from above, you simply wrap. I'm going this way, aren't I? So where am I? Going that way. No, going that way. I was going the wrong way. So you wrap the yarn as if and it looks like a letter U, and then you pull the bottom loop over the top loop. Whereas an E-wrap is done like that and looks like the letter E when viewed from above. And to do the yarn the knit two together on the previous row, the first of the two stitches is carried out as an E-wrap rather than as a U-wrap, and that gives that extra amount of yarn to be able to, which when you take because to knit two together you take a loop off one peg and put it onto the next and knit those two over the next stitch. And so it just gives a little bit of extra yarn to stretch the stitch from one peg to the next, and then to knit the two together. So it's quite a clever design. She does, I'm not giving away massive secrets because she actually has an online tutorial on YouTube, which is where I found the pattern. I like written patterns, so I paid for the written pattern, but you can make this simply by following her online tutorial. But there we go. So, and I'm making this on my smallest loom, as she recommends. This is about a 5-inch diameter loom, and it's got 24 pegs. And And so far, it's a very simple 8-pattern repeat, and you do 5 lots of 8-pattern repeats, and then you knit a couple of lines at the beginning and a couple of lines at the end, and then cast off, and it's all done. So obviously we'll get more of this done over the next week, and I will give you an update on how it's all going. So that's my latest work in progress, as well as all the ones I've previously had. So I've got a number of acquisitions to talk about today. Not all yarn, you'll be pleased to hear, although I did actually have to go to Mason's today, so there is some yarn, but there's a reason for the yarn, so I'm not upset with myself for having given in to temptation once more. Oh, by the way, my drink today is Flat Tire, which is the cloudy cider with rhubarb again. This is such a delicious drink. It is so refreshing and not very strong. It's where are we? Where's the going to be on here somewhere, surely. Normally it's in quite a prominent place, but oh yes, there we are, 4% volume. So it's reasonably strong cider, but it's not very strong. It's not blow your socks off strong, and obviously it's a lot less strong than wine would be. So the equivalent amount of wine would be much more alcoholic. So excuse me. Oh, that is such a nice flavour. It's the tang of rhubarb. It's like this sour sweets that you buy, the jelly sweets with the soured sugar on the outside. Haribo do them, but lots of other people do as well. And I remember them from when I was a child, and they just give that kind of feeling, and that's exactly the feeling that gives as well. It's just that lovely sudden shock of sourness, but not an overbearing sourness, like sucking lemons would give you. So, acquisitions. I had to buy a new selfie stick. I've been using my selfie stick an awful lot in the last month, and when I put it away the last time, 2-3 days ago, the plastic mooring, it wasn't as robust as this one, which has got a metal pin through. It had a plastic pin through, and the plastic pin broke, which meant that basically I had this in 2 parts, which was not much use to anybody really. So I went to Poundland and bought myself a new selfie stick, and this cost me £1, as you might expect with a shop named Poundland. And it's excellent. It's actually slightly longer than the one I had before. Anyone who watched my video yesterday will realise that I wasn't using the selfie stick. I picked up my tripod instead of my selfie stick, which the tripod isn't nearly as long as the selfie stick. The tripod is about the length of this when it's closed, so there's significant extra length on with the telescopic element of this. So I was holding the legs of the tripod, so it was very close to my face the whole time, whereas normally it's a bit further away and you can see a bit more around me. So apologies to anybody who felt that they were having too much of a close-up of me yesterday, but c'est la vie, that's what happens when you rush first thing in the morning to go out to work and pick up the wrong item. So that's my new selfie stick. While I was in Poundland, you may remember a few episodes ago, I'd used my new, my wooden DPNs to make the hat. And I'd said how much I enjoyed using the DPNs, but unfortunately the size which was painted on to the end of the DPN had rubbed off. So I knew what size those DPNs were because I've got the sizes of all the others written on, but I was a bit nervous about using the others because the sizes would rub off. Well, I had a comment from Hannah of A Cozy Cottage Crochet, whose podcast I follow, and she had an excellent solution to this. And while I was in Poundland, I bought myself some clear nail varnish. And her solution is simply to paint over the size indicator on the wooden knitting needles and let it dry, and you've effectively varnished it. I mean, you know, this is clear nail varnish. It is varnish, so it will preserve the size notification on the wooden implements. So that's what I will be doing with this. I haven't done it yet. I just need to sit down when I don't have cats climbing all over me, because the last thing I need is cats covered in clear nail varnish. And I will do that, and I will feed back to you how it goes, both in terms of doing it and the feel of it afterwards, and how it might affect the feel of the knitting needles. But I can't see it being a significant issue, and as I say, Hannah herself has used it. She uses it on her wooden Tunisian crochet hooks rather than on knitting needles, because as her podcast name suggests, she's a crocheter first and foremost. But I can't see there being any significant issue. I mean, you know, as long as you don't put too thick a coat on and let it dry properly and all that kind of thing. But I will be doing all of that and making sure it doesn't drip, and, you know, and so on and so forth. But I will give you feedback on how that goes. But I mean, for £1 for a bottle of clear nail varnish, it has to be worth a try, if nothing else. I'll come to the wool that I bought today shortly, but I also bought 2 books. I think in one of the episodes I showed where Mason's wool shop is on Sturt Street, and that's the original Mason's shop in Abingdon. The other 2 in Bath Street are later additions. And I also showed across the road from Mason's is the old Langford and Sons coal merchants building, which is a very fine facade, carved stone facade. And that now houses an Oxfam shop. So I often pop in there anyway, just to see what's going on. I'd leave them a few weeks to refresh their stock, because there are always interesting bargains to be found, and of course you're supporting a good cause at the same time. So I popped in, and the first thing I saw was this book, which is Quilting, Patchwork and Applique, a World Guide. And this isn't so much this is more of a textbook, if you like, well, a coffee table book, but this is about the different types of materials and designs used around the world throughout history. So it's a very attractively written book, presented book, with lots of lovely pictures which will provide for inspiration, and it's got lots of native, indigenous art, as opposed to simply being mainstream, not mainstream, but the predominant Western approach to textiles. And there's some lovely ceremonial weavings that are used, and it's really very attractively presented. So I'm going to enjoy reading this. I mean, these are just mind-blowing designs. I love this kind of thing, and these would lend themselves to being converted into crochet patterns. You can almost see, particularly this one, you can almost see the granny square popping out of the page at you. And I don't want to misappropriate other cultures, but to take inspiration from the art of another culture is, for me, paying homage to the creativity of those cultures. So I think I shall enjoy reading this, particularly on a day when I don't feel like doing any craft. I can just sit here in the corner of my room and have a glass of cider and snuggle up and just enjoy looking at the pictures and reading the text. The book is by Caroline Crabtree and Christine Shaw, and is a Thames and Hudson publication. I have absolutely no idea if it's available overseas. I don't even know if it's still in print. As I say, this was a book in a charity shop. I mean, every time I turn a page, I mean, just look at that. That is so spectacular, the geometric design. It's it never ceases to amaze me what is possible with very few colours and with actually repeated shapes. I mean, there are very few distinctive shapes within this design, but it's very attractive the way they're put together and the overall effect it creates. So I'm really looking forward to digging into that. I'm a sucker for a good coffee table book anyway, so that was one of the 2 books I bought in Oxfam. And the second one will probably come as no surprise to those of you who've been following my other podcast, the Vlogtober. I was for a period in the late noughties, in the mid to late noughties, I was for a period the only private subscriber to the Cambridge Journal of Ecclesiastical History. All the other subscribers were academic institutions. In fact, I stopped being a subscriber because I began to have access to the periodical via an institution. And I just love reading about history and things that interest me. So church history is something that interests me as a matter of course. So I saw this book and I thought, you know what, I have to have it. So this is the Cambridge Illustrated History of the Middle Ages from 1250 to 1520. 1520 is the Reformation, basically. So it's kind of saying from after the High Middle Ages of the German expansion through to the beginnings of the modern world, which began with the changing of the power structures of medieval Europe, particularly the influence of the church in decision making, although that continued on for several hundred years after the Reformation. But I'm really looking forward to this. This is more of a textbook. This is the kind of book which probably benefits from being dipped into rather than being read through from cover to cover. Although it may, sorry, I should say the editor is Robert Fossier. It may be one of those things that you can read from cover to cover, but I'm not sure that it is necessary to read it that way. I'm just wondering if I recognise the writers. These are more mainstream historians rather than church historians, so it is a more general medieval history rather than a church medieval history. I'm actually quite interested in part 2, which is a New Deal in the East and South, which is about the end of the Byzantine Empire and the rise of Turkish and Mongolian Islam, and the inroads into Christendom of the Ottoman Turks through the medieval period, which I've talked about again in one of my other episodes. So yeah, so I'm really looking forward to reading this. It's a big, thick, I mean, pound for pound, it's a very good value book, but I'm really interested in reading some of the chapters in here, so I shall let you know if it's any good, although I have no reason to believe it won't be. So I guess my final acquisitions then is the yarn. I have mentioned it a number of times, I am a great fan of Jada in Stitches. I mean, she is completely barking mad in the best possible way. She is a very good teacher. She's very clear and calm and concise with her instructions, and she doesn't make you feel as if you're stupid. I mean, many of the first things I did because of Jada in Stitches when I started crochet. So I love her channel, but her video this week is about Halloween, and it's a fairy tale cloak. And it's a hooded cape, and you can see the picture on the back there, which is really quite attractive. I mean, as she says, you can make it at varying lengths, depending upon the effect you're trying to have and what you're going to use it for. And I have a friend I know would really like this, and again I want it to be a Christmas present, and I already had some yarn that I'd bought a while ago but didn't know what I wanted to use it for. And this is one of the advantages of having a stash, in that it can give you the starting point for an idea. Again, there's no secret to this pattern. She takes you through the whole construction of this on her channel. But again, I bought the pattern because A, I like to have the written pattern, and B, it's a way of supporting these content creators that enables me and others to enjoy the fruits of their creativity in the future. So I that's why I bought it. And I remember I'm still making the Don's Day Off cardigan, which is a herringbone crochet cardigan, which I'm making in West Yorkshire Spinners Essential DK, which is a 75-25 wool and nylon mix. And I'm making that in a kind of pale green with a teal and emerald stripe pattern. But I did buy, at the same time, I bought 3 skeins of their kind of purple colours. And I didn't really know what I was going to make with them, but they were selling them for half price, because that was, as an introductory offer, that was the price that they bought them at. Well, they still had these colours available at that introductory price. So I went back and I bought 3 more of these and another one each of these. So I've got 2 each of these, and I've got 5 of these now. And that's more than enough to make that cloak. So it will be a kind of ombre effect. So this will be the hood and the top part of the cloak moving into this colour, and then this is the bottom and the border. Because after you make the hood and the cloak in 2 separate pieces, sew them together, and then put the whole border around the outside, which unifies the whole thing into a single item. So I just think these colours together will look absolutely fantastic. The wool was half price, so I couldn't really, it's barely more expensive than the acrylic yarns that I've been buying, so it was a bargain, really. And I think once it's finished, it will look really very fine. So as I say, the colours will be going in this kind of order. So I'm looking forward to getting going with that. Jada uses a medium worsted weight yarn and a 6-inch crochet hook. This is a DK weight yarn, and I'll probably use a 5.5 millimeters, not inch, 5mm hook. I mean, that's 6-inch hook. that would be a very big hook. No, she's using a 6mm hook. I may use a 5 or a 5.5. I think it's the kind of, I mean, she suggests that it's wet blocked as well to encourage that drape, and I think she's absolutely right. And I think having a slightly bigger hook than the yarn itself calls for, because this calls for a 4mm hook. So I think a 5, possibly a 5.5mm, will give the very loose and therefore more drapey effect. I love this wool. It's a very, it has a lovely feel to it. It's not at all scratchy. I know some wools can feel very prickly. This doesn't have that effect. It's not as soft. I mean, Debbie Bliss has produced 100% alpaca yarn, and oh my goodness, they have it in Masons, and it's beautiful. I don't have any, there isn't anything I would make that I would want to use 100% alpaca for, because it is so soft and so drapey, it actually completely lacks structure. So in fact, using it for shawls perhaps, or snoods, would be fine, but anything like a jumper or a cardigan, it will very quickly fall out of shape. It will very quickly become very loose and baggy. So it's not it, but I have to say it is exquisitely soft, and it's almost like silk. It is such good quality yarn. So that's the Debbie Bliss 100% alpaca. It's a new range that she's just brought out, and the colours are really to die for. They are lovely, bright, vibrant colours. There's an orange there. It's almost burnished gold. It's that kind of really deep but bright orange colour. So yes, that was a complete... I didn't buy any of that, but because I just don't think I would ever actually use it for anything. I mean, maybe I would at some point, but I at this stage I can't think of anything that I would make with it. So I've resisted the temptation, which I think is a positive thing. So I will be starting on this. I have done a little bit on my jumper. I think I will probably get that done once Vlogtober is over. I think realistically, I've only got an hour, possibly 2 hours of crafting a day, and that really will benefit from a few hours of mindless working, watching something. I've been falling behind with my podcasts. I have watched The Grocery Girls, but I haven't watched No Catchy Name, and I haven't watched Quo, and I haven't watched Cozy Cottage Crochet, and there are a number of others that I've not yet caught up with. And that's, as I say, this is largely because of Vlogtober. It's creating the content is taking a lot of my time, and I'm not bothered by that because I'm enjoying the process, and people, you appear to be enjoying the product as well, which is always a positive for any creator, that the audience that you're trying to serve actually enjoys what you're creating for them. So I think once Vlogtober is out of the way and November and December are properly here and the dark, cold nights are properly set in, because that's the other thing, it has been so mild, although it's been very windy today, and obviously up on White Horse Hill it was very blowy as well. It's actually been really nice weather. It's been mild, positively balmy in fact for a couple of days last weekend, and that means that you don't necessarily want to be indoors when the weather's like that. It would be foolish not to make the most of pleasant days for going out for these lovely walks in this beautiful part of the country that I live in. Why would I not want to do that? And it's good for me. It's good exercise. I mean, some of the breathlessness yesterday possibly is due to the fact that I'm nearly 50 and probably heavier than I should be and all the rest of it. But I mean, actually in large part it was a very steep hill, and it was very windy, and it's very difficult to walk, talk and breathe in a high wind simultaneously. So I plead my case there. But there's no doubt, I've talked about the mindfulness that crochet and knitting and the other fibre related crafts create, that space where you are occupied but you have sufficient brain power left over that you can actually think about other things while you're doing something with your hands. Well, one of the other aspects of therapy for people who suffer from significant mental health issues is to take regular exercise, because it is good for you physically and good for your health, which being in good health will help you to be in good mental health on the one hand, but it's also been shown that taking exercise itself can change your mood, that you are happier after even fairly light exercise. I mean, not ambling, but a brisk walk. It doesn't have to be a run, it doesn't have to be going to the gym, it just has to be a brisk walk for 10 minutes, and your mood is elevated as a result of that. So getting out and about while it's possible to get out and about is a positive thing. So although it has taken away from my crafting, as I've said before, I never want the crafting to become a chore. I want it to be something that I enjoy doing, which it is. It still is at this moment. I love doing what I do. But if I don't feel like doing it because I've been out for a walk and I've done some filming and I've done some editing and I just want an hour of sitting and reading or sitting and watching a comedy or whatever it happens to be, or sitting and chatting with my flatmate when he comes in from work, it's actually, nice not to feel that, oh, well, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done. So whereas in the past I've said that the weekly schedule of my podcast in some ways helps me to not prevaricate and procrastinate and actually get on with doing things, and it does provide that because I want to have something to talk about the next time. At the same time, I don't want it to become, I must get this done because, it's my job. Because it isn't. It's a hobby. It's a hobby I love. It's a hobby that gives as much as takes from me. And I don't want to change the nature of that at all. So I hope that little meander kind of goes some way to explaining why I'm not too concerned that things aren't getting done, but they are getting done. That they're there. They will be picked up. And of course, the other side of crafting, as I'm sure everybody who watches this podcast is aware, it's quite difficult sometimes to make things for yourself, to say, well, this time is my time and I'm going to finish that jumper because it's mine. If, say, for example, Charlotte's Christmas present, I wanted to get that done. The babies' things, I wanted those to be done for when the babies were born, and they were. And it's easier to pressure yourself to finish things for other people to their deadlines. I mean, not that they put deadlines, but that you have deadlines like birthdays or Christmas or whatever. And it can be difficult sometimes to say, well, actually, no, you deserve this item and you deserve to get it finished, so just give that time to yourself. So having said all that I've said, I do have to be careful not to say, well, I'm not important enough to give that time over to me because I can only do one thing. I'd better do this thing for somebody else. So sometimes you have to be a little selfish, if you like, self-aware, or at least fulfill your own needs and desires occasionally. Not talking about all the time, and not talking about matters of life and death here. We're talking about creative crafts, things that are extra to daily life. They're not, if people don't get the thing, it's not the end of the world. And if you don't get the thing, it's not the end of the world either. Anyway, so, recommendations. Well, this weekend The Walking Dead resumes. So it will be Monday in the UK. So that's something. So if those of you who, like me, enjoy The Walking Dead, this season promises to be a bit of a firecracker, I think. After last season, which was a very mixed... I've rewatched season 7, and it was... I think probably watching it episode by episode, week by week, and then the 2 or 3 months break between the mid-season finale and the end of the season, it allowed the sense of despondency and despair to really build up, which is not a bad thing, because that was I think, what they were actually striving for, that this could be finally the thing that breaks the community, breaks them totally. The unexpected and unnecessary deaths of such significant characters. I'm being careful not to spoil it for people who haven't yet made it up to the end of season 7. But at the same time, there were moments of hope, but also perhaps a revelation that I've mentioned this before, that the final 2 episodes were all about how they were building a future for the next generation, for people like Carl, Rick's son, and his daughter, and Judith, sorry, I couldn't think of her name then, his daughter Judith. And those are very good and noble ideas, and that they were prepared to kill living people because they had to in order to safeguard a future where perhaps killing wouldn't be necessary. And we've all felt that. I mean, the generation that fought the Second World War, the generation that went to Vietnam, the generation that went to the Falklands in the UK, and so on and so forth, they felt this need to face down oppression. Whether they were right or wrong in their assessment of that oppression, that was a primary driving force, if not for the politicians, then certainly for the soldiers and for their families. And I don't think we should ever forget that. Whatever we think about the wisdom or the legality of military interventions, the people who are actually doing the intervening on the ground are often, usually, motivated by higher beliefs and standards than perhaps the grubby politics that is often the root cause. So support your servicemen and women, even if you don't support the wars that they're sent to fight. And what was fascinating about all of that is the fact that the very final climactic battle that happened at the end of season 7 was kicked off by Carl. That he himself was the violent actor. So this sense that these people had that they had to be violent for the sake of the next generation so that they wouldn't have to be violent was very subtly undercut by the almost throwaway fact that Carl, the next who was the exemplar and the type of the next generation. So it'll be interesting to see how that theme develops in Series 8. I mean, it's a very well-written series. And I enjoy the zombie bits as well. I mean, who doesn't enjoy a bit of Living Dead nonsense? So yeah, so television, The Walking Dead is about to resume. In a break with other episodes of this podcast, I'm also going to recommend 2 apps. Now, the first one was actually recommended by Jodie of the Grocery Girls, and I downloaded it on my iPad, although it is also available on Android as well, and it's called Word Cookies, where you progress through various levels of chefdom by you're given a selection of letters, and you have to make 3, 4, 5 and so on letter words, and there are a set number of words that you have to make, but there are also extra words that you can make and get extra bonuses by building up the number of extra words. Word of warning, it is extremely addictive. It's very difficult when you do one level and the letters appear for the next. You think, oh well, I'll just do this as well, and then the letters appear for the next and you think, well, I'll just do this one as well, and you can very quickly lose an awful lot of time with the app. But I find it's very good. I mean, 1 or 2 minor criticisms. Obviously, well, not obviously, it is an American app, and therefore some of the words are in American English, which means that you have to think slightly if you're a British English speaker, and particularly a British English writer or reader, because 1 or 2 words are actually spelt differently. And not just the usual words like colour, for example. Centre, where the English spell it the French way, C-E-N-T-R-E, and of course Americans change the E and the R around, so it's centre. So it's just little things like that you have to watch out for, but all in all, it's still a really enjoyable app. Oh, and Mould was another one, which in English is M-O-U-L-D. But, you know, there you go. The other app is something called 2048. And the mathematically minded amongst you will know that 2048 is twice 1024. And 1024 is a kilobyte, for example. It's the first binary number of that's past 1,000. So the game starts. The classic game starts with a 4x4 grid and 2 tiles on that grid, and the only actions you can do is to swipe left or right, up or down. And if 2 tiles are next to each other that are the same number, then they combine to double their number. So if you've got 2 2s next to each other and you swipe to the right, they become 4. So 1 tile with the number 4 on. And as the name would suggest, the purpose of the game is to create a tile numbered 2048. And if you think that word cookies is addictive, 2048 is it's such an easy game to play, but it's a very difficult game to succeed at. So you can get to 256, where you have to have 2 128s, and you get 128 by having 2 64s, and you get to 64 by having 2 32s, which you get from having 2 16s, which you get from having 2 8s, which you get from having 2 4s, which you get from having 2 2s. Now, the squares appear in an empty space randomly, and occasionally a number 4 will appear instead of a number 2, so you don't have to combine 2 2s to get a 4 as the first step. And once you've got all the squares filled and no further moves to be made by swiping left, right, up or down, then the game ends. The other thing to know is that when you swipe to the left, everything moves as far as it can to the left. So if there are 3 things to the left of one square on the 4th square, then it won't move, but everything else above and below it will if they're not filled up. I'm not really giving you a very clear explanation, but if you play the game, you'll very quickly pick it up. It is, as I say, it's an incredibly addictive game. And even if you do get to 2048, there are a minimum number of moves that you can carry out in order to get to 2048, and naturally mathematicians have worked out what those moves are, and so you then have the perfect game. And I think it is possible to actually get to 4096, isn't it? Yeah, 4096, which is 2 2048s. I would love to see that. I've got as far as having 1024, 1024, but that's nowhere. Actually, although that sounds as if, oh, you're nearly at 2048, it took a long time to get 1024, and of course you've then got to try and get the other 1024, and that's because 1024 is 2 to the 10, is it? 4 is squared, 16 is cubed, 32 is fourths, 64 is fifths, 128 is 6, 256 is 7, 512 is 8, 1024 is 9, so it's 2 to the 9. Is that right? Sounds right. Anyway, it's either 2 to the 9 or 2 to the 10. I'd have to work it out. I'm just trying to... I'm not going to go through all that again for you. You really don't want to know. Ah, no, it is 2 to the 10 because I missed out 2 to the 3 is 8. So 16 is 4, 32 is 5, 64 is 6, 128 is 7, 256 is 8, 512 is 9, so 1024 is 10. That's correct. Sorry about that. The dangers of doing mental arithmetic, it doesn't always work. Anyway, so 2048, it's available on the Play Store and it's available on the App Store, so whether you're using an Android or a Mac OS operating system, then you'll be fine. So iOS, I think they call it, don't they now? So that's the end of my recommendations, and that's the end of this podcast for today. So I will get this uploaded and let you all watch it tonight, and I will enjoy Strictly, and I will cast on my new... Well, I'm in two minds. No, I think I will cast on the new the Fairy Tale cloak. I'll get that started. The hood is made in 2 pieces and joined together, and then the bottom is made separately and joined together. So I can make the 2 hood pieces today and just get that first part completed. So yes, I look forward to speaking to you again next week. For those of you who followed the Vlogtober, I will look forward to speaking to you again tomorrow. And for now, it's a case of goodbye.